I thought I could make this a fun little video, but considering couldn't stop crying while I was writing the outline script, I don't really know how this is gonna go. So July 13th is my 8-year anniversary of moving to the UK from the US. And in the past, it's been fun to reflect on how many years it's been and the journey of getting over here and everything that's happened since I've been in London. In the last couple of years, it hasn't been that way. Some of you who have been watching the videos for a long time will know that I originally moved over to the UK because I married somebody who was British. And then those of you who have listened to my interview on Hannah Witton's podcast would also know that that marriage is no longer a marriage. I don't really know how I feel about saying this on YouTube, because at least when it was on Hannah's podcast, it's very difficult for people to comment on podcast stuff. And I got a lot of really amazing messages from people after they listened to that podcast. But those people had to seek me out on Instagram, whereas on YouTube, any old Tom, Dick, or Harry can just pop down into that comment section and write whatever they want about me and my situation, even though they know really nothing about any of it. But the thing is, when I did that podcast, it seemed like a lot of people really gained a lot from it. There was a lot of people, especially women, that reached out to me that were in similar situations, and they were happy to hear it. And I know when I was going through my divorce that I didn't feel like there was enough information out there for people to be able to relate to going through that. So here we go. I guess I'm going to tell you just the really brief story of how I moved over here, because this is a video about 8 years being in the UK. I don't really know how else to get around and talk about that without, talking about this whole thing. So when I was 23, back in 2013, I married another 23-year-old who is British, and we got married young and quickly because we needed to be married for me to be able to move over here. So yeah, then I moved over here and life was pretty great. But as most 20-year-olds do, and people in their 20s do, I grew significantly over the majority of my 20s. I can't speak for the person in the relationship, but I guess there was some growth there too. And unfortunately, we grew in different directions for something that's very difficult to compromise on, impossible really, and that is the decision to have or not have children. I felt I did not want to have children, and I was definitely not in a position to just try it out and see how it went, because that's obviously extremely unfair to that child. And my ex felt he had grown feelings that made him feel very strongly that he did want to have children. So in early 2019, we separated, and then just before all the COVID stuff kicked off is when the divorce was finalized. I was very lucky in that I originally was in London on 2 back-to-back spouse visas, and then in 2018, I was able to get my indefinite leave to remain, which is basically a permanent residency visa. So although we are not together anymore, I can still live here and work here and do pretty much everything except for vote. So this whole anniversary thing, it's a bit sullied at this point, because obviously the whole move over here was for a reason that no longer exists, and I don't even ever speak to that person or 95% of the people that were involved in my first few years here in the UK. It's a bittersweet thing. However, at this point, my life is so much better than it was before. Despite COVID ripping through my business, all the things I had to deal with, and obviously anybody who's gone through divorce knows how difficult, no matter the intentions of the two people who are getting the divorce. So yeah, I am trying to look at it as putting all of the negativity aside and remembering that I'm now living this much better life because of that decision that was made. And I'm so incredibly lucky. I'm in a really good position, better than most people in this world right now. And I still get to live in London, which is the city that I have absolutely loved for the last few years. And I continue to grow to love as I discover new areas. I'm living in a new area I've never lived in before that I'm loving. And overall, despite it all, it's all been good, and I've ended up in a good place. Wow, that was a lot of deep thoughts for what you thought was just going to be a video answering your questions on Instagram about what it's like to live in the UK. Okay, I am going to go through questions that people submitted on my Instagram about moving to and living in the UK for 8 years. I'm going to go through these questions pretty quickly because there are a lot of them, so excuse the bluntness for some of the answers. Jagged Reaction asks, who does the best food, US or UK? I'm going to say UK because the UK is better at incorporating vegetables and the portion sizes are closer to what normal humans should be eating. Lucy, my auntie said, how's your health insurance? I don't have any because we have socialized healthcare here and I don't need it. It's freaking great. One of the biggest blessings throughout all of this COVID stuff is no matter how little money I made, I never, ever, ever had to worry about if I was to get into a car accident or if I was to get COVID and had to go into the hospital. I never had to worry about paying anything if any medical problems cropped up at all. I hope I will appreciate that till the day that I die. As an American, that is so big for me. Lisa Bender asks, so did you have friends over there? And when no, where did you find friends? No, I didn't really have any friends over here. I ended up making friends with my ex's friends. They were some of my closest friends and then we're not friends anymore because of everything that happened. Well, a couple of really lovely ones. We've stayed close, but everyone else, we are not friends anymore. But also, because the majority of my time I've lived here, I haven't worked in an office setting, or I've just worked on my own, really, working from home. It has been difficult to make friends, but I have made some amazing friends mostly through what I do. So meeting people in the industry through events and even just like chatting through Instagram and then planning to meet up and having lunch and getting to know each other. So I have a really amazing close-knit group of friends that I really cherish and love. But you have to put the effort in to make friends like that here, like a lot of effort. Mr. Billy Sanchez asked, at any point did you feel isolated? If so, when did you feel it most? Yes, I mean, COVID stuff, I definitely felt isolated, just like at some points not being able to see my family. But actually, and also I think obviously like in the beginning of when my separation happened, I felt very isolated. And I had weekends where I was just not seeing, I didn't like speak to a single soul because none of my friends were around to do anything. And then I was just living on my own. The times that I felt the most isolated were, I think it was about 4 or 5 years into, about 4 years of my time here into it. I think everyone thinks when you move abroad that you are going to feel lonely and isolated in the beginning, and you absolutely can. But what people also don't understand is that as you've started to make a life away from your family and your original friend group in a foreign country, that those connections can really start to slip away. And then, so you lose friendships because you're not together anymore and you can't see each other all the time. And that's for a variety of reasons too. And that's both good and bad, that stuff like that happens. But, so basically what happened for me was I was getting to like year 4 into year 5 and I was feeling like my life back at home was disappearing. Not my family. My family's always been amazing, and then I was feeling like I wasn't connected here because I was trying really hard to be part of a group of friends that actually I didn't really have anything in common with. And I had people in my life that truly would never be able to understand what it's like to live abroad because they've never done it. And they were not able to provide any support for me either. So I did go to therapy a lot to try to get through that. And I did come out through that, which was good. And I learned what I needed to do to be able to feel more connections and to feel less lonely. Jumbo asked, coming from the US, was it easy to adapt? Culturally, we are very different, wouldn't you say? So I don't know. So before I moved here, I lived in Italy, and obviously the culture difference there is significantly different than the culture differences between here and the US. So I would say like culturally it is different, but being in London is not that different from like being in New York, and that's where I would have been if I hadn't moved here. So I wouldn't say that like there was huge cultural differences, just small things, obviously language things that were different, service at like restaurants is different, but I wouldn't say there's anything like that was really difficult to deal with. Majkey DevOps asks, what is different in your life between the 1st and 8th years from point of financial, personal? Well, obviously there's a pretty significant difference of I'm single. I never thought I'd be living on my own in London, but I gotta tell you, I'm loving living by myself. Talking about like coming through and getting better at being on my own and feeling less lonely. Living by myself is awesome. I love it. Oh, except I'm fully responsible for all the decor stuff, which is why you'll see my half-finished gallery wall over here. I'll finish it one day. Financially, I feel like I would have been much better off if COVID hadn't happened. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that, but I'm still in a very privileged and lucky position. So I'm okay with that. And personally, I'm at this point with my friendships where I live really close to a lot of my friends that I spend the most time with. And that feels really nice that we can just meet up on a whim when we're bored after work, or if it's a sunny day and we want to go to the park. We all live close enough to each other that we can go meet up for an hour or go get a coffee or a drink or something. And I've always wanted that out of London. I had that in Florence when I lived there. I loved being close enough to people to walk and meet up with them for just a little bit of time and not have to go all the way across the city to see them. So I'm loving that part of my personal life, I would say. I'm sure other things have changed too. I mean, I was 23 when I moved here. I'm 31 now. So I've matured significantly. I have different interests and different passions. I feel very passionate about climate change. What else am I passionate? I feel very passionate about climate change and environmental sustainability, a few other political issues, and I've definitely grown in that aspect too. Mr. Ash Tim asks, what is one thing you still can't get used to? I don't really know if there's anything I can't get used to. I think, for example, not having air conditioning in the flats, I don't really find that difficult. I have a very good fan that keeps me cool, and I just do what I need to do to keep the flat cold, and I don't complain about it. I don't think. I think 8 years is long enough that if I'm not getting used to something, like I need to figure out what's going on with me, because there's nothing that difficult in my life that I cannot get used to it. Lucian asks, how long was it until you felt settled in? I don't feel like I felt settled in really until I moved into actual London. So when I first moved to England, the first year and a half or so, I lived out in Surrey, which is a suburb. And it's not in London, it's in the home county. So it's on the outskirts, and lots of people commute in from there. But I didn't really feel like that's where I belonged. I knew I needed to be in the city. So once I moved into the city, and then I felt more settled because I didn't have to get someone to drive me around places. I could get anywhere I wanted to go on public transportation. Marek Kikol asks, most people you hang out with are from the UK or not necessarily? So mostly not from the UK. I have quite a few friends that are American, not by choice, just because meeting friends of friends and stuff. I do have a pretty good group of friends who are English, but I think at this point it's more people who are not English. Like one of my closest friends is Lithuanian. You guys know my friend Taylor Fuller, she's American. And then, I have just kind of a residual group of friends who are from all different places around the world. Oh, I have a lot of Australian friends too. My friend Elle, she's been around the channel. She's Australian. Her husband's Australian. So mostly not English. Connie Musso said, something you wish you had known 8 years ago. I think a piece of advice I would give myself is to work harder to have a group of friends that is not affiliated with my ex-husband. That was obviously a very difficult part of dealing with the divorce, is losing a huge group of friends that I have worked so hard to be friends with. So I was so lucky I did have a small group of close-knit friends outside of that circle that we have become so much closer because of everything that happened. So I'm really happy that I got to nurture those friendships. And now I'm starting to build a bit of a bigger group of people who I'm really close with who are just my own friends. And it's really nice. Trip Hacks DC asks, do Brits dig the US accent? Okay, so it's not like how Americans love the British accent for either because they think it's really cool or because it's sexy or something. So I don't think Brits think American accents are sexy at all. Occasionally people will say to me, oh, I really like your accent. I don't know why. I feel like sometimes American accents even grind my gears, and sometimes I hear myself and I'm like, oh my God, just stop talking. Mary Nico asks, do you see yourself living in the UK for another 8 years or move back to the US? I plan to stay here for the longest term. Obviously, my business is based here. And also, I've lived most of my adult life here, so I don't really want to start over again, only if like some crazy cool opportunity came up, but then it gave me the option to come back as frequently as I wanted. So no, I'm staying here, and I also don't want to leave the free healthcare, and I like that there's mostly no guns here. Michelle Rodriguez asked, do you feel like you can call the UK home? Yes, this is when I say, sometimes I still call New York home just because it's like out of habit, but for sure when I refer to home, this is what I mean, is here in my flat in London. Mary Cecilia asked, what is the most difficult part of living in London? And that is absolutely the cost of it, especially as someone who owns her own business, and that the income from that significantly fluctuates even at the best of times. So dealing with, especially now that I'm living on my own and I really, really would like to continue living on my own, it's very expensive to do that. For me personally, some people probably don't think it's expensive. Natalie asked, were there places you love to go since you first moved to the UK that closed because of COVID? I think the only one that's definitely closed so far is a restaurant called Cub. And we actually, just before COVID kicked off, we went and filmed a whole video about that restaurant. And it's a low waste restaurant that was started by Mr. Lyon, the famous mixologist, and also Doug McMaster, who is the guy behind Silo, which is the UK's first fully zero waste restaurant. So they were doing really cool things. The food was amazing. The chef there, Matt, was fantastic. All the staff were so great there. And I was really looking forward to like sending more of you guys there to support them and to just going to visit myself. And they did shut early on during COVID, which was sad. But I've seen Matt, the chef, a couple of times. He started a new business and he's at a different pub and stuff. So I've seen him a couple of times, so that's been nice. Val Springer asked, do you ever speak with a UK accent? No, can't say never. Someone did ask, can you speak in it now? No way. I usually have to have quite a few beers in me for that to happen. And it's usually like when I'm imitating somebody being like, annoying and posh, I guess I would say, like being blah, blah, blah. The only thing where I do speak differently now in terms of my inflections of the end of my sentences tend to be a bit different. Obviously, I use British vocabulary now over American vocabulary. So saying words like jumper instead of sweater and pants instead of underwear, because that gets confusing if you don't get that right. Fresh Seaside asked, what irritates you mostly in the UK? I don't know if it's not irritate, that's the right word, but I really miss having like really nice beaches that you could go to most of the summer. The UK obviously has beaches, England has beaches, but I'm from New York. I grew up on Long Island. I was literally surrounded by fairly nice beaches on the ocean. And you could just drive there and pay like $5 to park and just spend a day on the really nice sandy beach. And that's not really as common here. It's just like a whole different vibe, really. So I do miss like being able to easily get to nice beaches. Kepner asked, any other businesses that you're currently working on? Well, I have 2 ideas I really want to kick off, but the plan is I need Love in London to get back to a stable level of revenue. And then that means I can get people. I had hired freelancers before COVID and I had to let a few of them go, but I want to get freelancers back in to take over a lot of the work that I'm having to do again. And then once that's kind of running a little bit smoother, I want to invest and start building these other businesses. So watch this space. Kepner also asked, after 8 years, did you get used to the weather? Yeah, I'm used to it. I've said this in other videos recently, it doesn't rain as much as everybody says. However, ironically, it is pouring outside right now and it's meant to be like this for the next like 9 days. But I actually quite like that in the summer. It doesn't get blistering hot and the winter doesn't get as cold as it does like say in New York. So it's nice. Donna asked, do you ever feel the urge to move back to the States? No, I think I kind of answered this, but no urge to move back. Maybe at some point if like my parents start to get unwell or something like that, then maybe temporarily I would go back to help them. But no, I really don't. My life is here and I think my life is better because it's here. S. Robinson asks, are there things you miss from the States that you can't get or do or eat in the UK? The only thing really that I miss consistently, which is kind of weird, but is frozen yogurt where you can go and put the toppings on yourself. We have a lot of frozen yogurt here, but you tell the people what toppings to put on. No, I don't want that. I want to go in, I want to have the cup, I put as much frozen yogurt in as I want. Usually what I do is, and tell me if you guys know this trick. If you don't, game changer. You do some of the froyo, then you go get toppings, and then you do more froyo on top, and then you get more toppings, because then you aren't like, you eat all the toppings at the top and then it's just froyo at the bottom. Then it's all layered and it's all mixed together. But I want to be able to do that, and then I want to go and I want to weigh it and see how heavy it is, and I want to pay by the weight. And I have not found a place here that I can do that. If you know someplace in London I can do that, please tell me in the comments. Passporting to, can't read the rest. Before COVID, how often were you able to travel to other countries? So before COVID, I was traveling a lot for work, mostly, also some fun. And I was traveling like once a month for the months leading up to COVID. When all this stuff goes away and we can travel again, I will not be traveling that much, because actually I love being in London. And I kind of feel like I travel sometimes when I'm in London, so I don't feel the need to go to a bunch of different countries around Europe on the weekends. I also am now aware of like how much of an environmental impact that has if I was to fly to do that, to go to all these places. So I'd rather save up and do like longer trips, so I can just fly once every couple of months or once every few months. That being said, though, I think I have seen a lot of Europe already from my many years of traveling through various ways. So I've seen a lot that, and I don't feel compelled to like go to a bunch of places. The only place I really like to go to is, I like to go to Italy, obviously, and I just like going to places down south where it's warmer and it's by the sea and stuff. So Sazdova asked, do you regret moving to the UK, or if you could go back, would you do things differently? I don't regret it. I don't know. It's a tricky one. I'm not really at that place where I'm like, everything happens for a reason. You know, it's I look back on that time where I was married and you know, I'm thankful for it. I'm not really like in that mature position yet. However, I'm really happy where I ended up. So I don't regret it is the answer. Chel Shafi asked, do you ever consider moving back to be closer to family? I kind of have answered this already, but this person said that they're struggling with this and I'm only 6 months in. I'm personally, while I'm close to my family and they're very supportive and I try to be supportive to them, I'm very used to being away from my family. I have lived on another continent from them for even before I moved here. So almost for a decade, I have learned to live far away from them. And they have learned to live far away from me. I'm also quite lucky in that my parents have my sister who lives like 20 minutes away from them. So they aren't on their own or anything. But that being said, my parents are still fairly young and in okay health. So this might change if that changes. Solon asks, what did the English lifestyle teach you? I think it taught me to appreciate smaller spaces and having less things. Consumerism is a thing here, but not as much as it is in the US. So people are used to having smaller houses, but they still make them work and they just have less crap in them, to be honest. I've also learned to be a bit slower with things and to appreciate cutting the end of the day off, especially as somebody who works for herself. I have to have a hard and fast, like 6:30-ish, I should be stopping work because I'm going to go meet friends at the pub, because that's what you do. It's the evening. You're finished working now. So I feel like if I were to live in New York, I would not feel that way and I'd probably just work all the time. It's also taught me that you don't really need a dryer for your clothes or your sheets or your towels. And anyone who tells you otherwise that lives over here, don't listen to them. They're just being cranky. My electricity bills are so low because I don't have a dryer. So I air dry everything and towels are a little bit crunchy, but you know what? I get over it. It's fine. Thank you for watching this really weird and strange video and probably not at all what you expected. I hope you're hanging in there and doing okay during what is still very difficult and crazy times. And yeah, thanks for being here and watching to the end. Stay well. Cheers to another 8 years. Hopefully.